And we're back. This is the Dream Makers Podcast. We're super excited about this particular session. We have a very special guest with us. We have Jon Kidwell. He's an author. I read his book when it first came out, and I'm glad that I was able to get him on here. And we're going to talk a little bit about that shortly. But sir,
yes,
could you just introduce yourself? Tell our listeners a bit about you, what's going on in your world, your business, your writing, and what your plans are.
My goodness. Well, thank you for having me, Brandon, and for picking up the book and reading it. I can't wait to dive in and talk with you about that. And as you and I were doing a little bit beforehand, just so important and so fun to be able to talk about servant leadership, and it's how we approach it, its impact on our people, our organization. But you said a little bit about me. So as you noted, I am an author. I've written that book, but on top of that, or I should say separately than that, I also have a leadership development company called LeadWell, and we focus on developing outstanding leaders and creating thriving workplaces. We love to go in and walk alongside leaders. We know that leading is an overwhelming job, every single day, every single moment of every single day. And we know that a lot of training doesn't stick. And so we love to come in and walk alongside leaders through training, through our coaching programs, through our online platform, and really give them and their team the tools that they need to be able to thrive. And so that is what I spend most of my time doing if I am not with my family and enjoying wife and 3 kiddos and friends and the community that we're a part of.
And he's podcasting, and he's writing books, and I am curious. Do you have more books in you, or do you think you're Yes, tremendous.
Yeah. So the list right now is 7. And to be fair, that's a part of our business, right? That's a part of what we want to do to help deliver those tools and be able to walk alongside with folks. But yes, very, very kind of early sneak peek. I think the next 2 will be called Build a Team You Love and Outstanding Leadership. So there you go. Very early sneak peek. You're going to have to wait a long time because I have committed to the team that I'm not writing one this year.
Well, all right. So you wrote this book, and
Yes, sir.
And it somehow ended up in my hands, and it was just looking at it and reading through it. It really it kind of makes you, as you're reading it, take a look or reflect on yourself and in your own leadership style and how you approach certain conversations that you have with the people that you're leading, and really what it means to be a servant leader. And I want to really from the onset, just maybe we can start diving into kind of that portion of it, and then we can just kind of follow through every step after that.
That sounds great. I don't know about you and the folks that are listening to this, that are engaging in this conversation with you and I've always taken the approach of servant leadership. And what I found is that my idea of that, one, was a little bit warped, and 2, wasn't exactly what everybody else saw, kind of the cultural inlay on what does that mean. Like even if you just go do random Google searches, you're not going to find it. The best thing I could find was a servant leader is one who serves. And I just felt like I was chasing my tail. And then there's this idea that to be a servant leader, you almost have to be less than leadership, and that it's a weak, very complacent and kind of kumbaya approach. And none of those are, necessarily bad in and of themselves. It's just not the full story. And it is not the picture that is painted by other folks that we would look at and say, man, they're amazing servant leaders. That those folks are really quite lovingly bold, that yes, they humbly serve, but they are able to stand tall in some very trying things and do it with a gentle strength. And they have this wonderful way of balancing why they're doing the work, loving the people they do it with, and definitely focusing on tremendous results. And so that was my own journey of trying to go through that. And then I ended up writing about that. And as you said, it really became a little bit of a reflective book for the reader. It became a little bit of a rocket fuel and encouragement of like this right here is and can be servant leadership, and a little bit of a coaching book just helping guide each of us through it based on the 10-year process that it took me to grow into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you go through kind of this, it's almost like it's a step. So, you look at maybe some of the issues that you're having as far as your leadership is concerned, and the things that maybe you're noticing that you're struggling with, whether it was communication, whether it was, meeting deadlines or whatever it ends up being. And it's like, well, why is this happening? And so you start looking at, really what it means to be a leader, and the fact that until we truly reach our capacity and our capabilities, it's like we'll just always kind of floundering in the water and never really meeting our own expectations for what we feel like or know what our true potential is. And through this book, I have it obviously right in front of me, but you go through, and so you define it, and then you find, defining what was the defining moment for you as far as your servant leadership was concerned?
So there were a couple, right? Like I remember being young and being with my father at a youth activity where I was kind of the youth president of the group. There's an adult leader of the group too, and the adult leader was a bit brass, crash, kind of big, bold, take charge, talk loud, talk over type of thing. And I just remember being in the car. My dad said, "You don't have to be the loudest one in the room to be a leader." And that influenced very, very much a lot of the next years of my life. And I'm grateful for that. I also had this moment where I was now leading the largest team that I ever had, over 92 people. And I was carrying all of it. I wasn't able to tell anybody no, because I thought that meant that I wasn't being nice. And so therefore I was not being a servant leader. I wasn't getting to that last 10% of truth, even though one of the things that I strive for so much was to be honest. I wasn't getting there because of my own discomfort and because of how I thought it was going to reflect on other people looking at me. And it really came from, me being super nice is really more about what you think of me than me demonstrating my care for you. And I saw that as a contradiction in terms of servant leadership, where really, if I care for you, I'm going to do some of those hard things for our relationship, to help you grow, to help the organization grow. And it was a Saturday morning where I was just collapsed on the room in the guest room in our house, just ready to completely give in, burnt out, exhausted, taking all of it on, wanting and seeing others lead in this sort of way. But I knew I didn't want to be that big old boss, like jerk style. But what I was doing wasn't working. Kind of that less than weak and almost like a doormat style of servant leadership wasn't doing it. And so then I started diving in and studying and looking at, what's Lencioni say? What's Maxwell say? What did Greenleaf write in The Servant Leader in 1970? And what does the Bible say? And what I saw was a much more mission-driven, people-oriented, lovingly bold, humble approach where these folks are really standing in the tension of, we do important things. It's why we step into this responsibility. We love people. And because of that, we actually want tremendous results. I use the language in the book, servant heart, business mind, and they stand in the tension of being able to do that. And so it began the journey of standing in that tension, like working out, just holding things, isometric lifting is extremely challenging. Like it is very hard to just stand there. And the longer you stand there, the heavier it gets. So what does it take? What do we need? Well, my internal character, people around me, because leadership is lonely if I let it be that. And then some of that skill development that you were talking about, communication and discernment, but being able to mobilize people and building my own expertise, all of those things were the launching point then of looking at it and saying, okay, the very best servant leaders have wonderful character, build great relationships, and they use their skills tremendously to help move the organization, the people, and everything that they're doing forward.
And I mean, that's, you think about, and those moments, and you realize, you're like, why haven't I been doing it this way the whole time?
Right? Yeah. Absolutely. It's just, you're sitting there and it's almost like the veil just gets taken off, as you said, and you're thinking, why haven't I been doing it this way the entire time? And for me, what I realized was that there's a pretty big disconnect of how I thought it was going, or what might be in my mind as this is best. But then I would show up in a different way, and through reading and learning from Dr. Henry Cloud, from Dr. John Townsend, through going to some of their programs, they call it character structure. And it's really some of those internal things where we have deep-rooted relational needs to be able to connect with other humans, to be able to separate, be by ourselves, kind of stand alone, to be able to bring together good and bad things and say, like, yes, things are good and things are bad, and this is reality. And then to be able to stand into some of those difficult conversations, right? Sometimes it's with a pastor, sometimes it's with a CEO, sometimes it's with someone that you deeply, deeply respect, and you have to bring bad news or disagreement or something like that for the good of others. And those internal pieces, unless we work to build those so that we can meet the demands of our reality, that gap still stays there. And so I always say, everybody always asks, John, how long did it take you to write the book? It's like, well, it took me 3 years, but it took me 10 years to live all of this stuff so that I even felt like I could be in a place to write the book.
Right. And, and in this book, you start off as, those defining moments, and it's kind of like this progression that we've been talking about. But so you defining moments, and then defining what leadership is, what it really is. And then you go through and you start, so you're defining, then you redefine, and then you have this one where it's a realign, and you're talking about 3 key attributes. So 3 things, and that are just critical to being a servant leader. Share a little bit with us about what that looks like and what that is.
Okay, so imagine a 3-circle Venn diagram. For those that are listening, just draw a circle on top and then 2 circles underneath. So you got that fairly standard 3-circle Venn diagram. And on top, we have character. Not just, which is where I was on the beginning of kind of this whole journey, was just moral, ethical, good dude. But not just that. It is what I was just talking about that character that is the ability to meet the reality that you face and the circumstances that you find yourself in. So character, that's what calls us up. And then we have our relationships, those healthy relationships that are grounded in being present and empathy and being able to connect with folks, encouraging one another, cheering them on, galvanizing them, and really getting them to do some things, and being able to call each other to act. But those type of healthy relationships and having people around you that can support you, those are what keep us from falling. And then our skills. And we outline skills of the actual skill of being able to serve, to vision cast, the expertise you bring, communication, discernment, developing others, mobilizing them to go. And those are the things that move us forward. And so those 3, the character, relationship, and skills, call us up, keep us from falling, and move us forward. And what that does is, as we continue to bring those 3 Venn diagram circles overlaying one another, me, you, Brandon, everybody that's listening, we start to become more whole leaders, where there's not these compartments that are kind of out there on the side, where maybe I'm really good with people and I'm good at showing up, but I don't have the skills. And so folks are like, they're like, they're a good dude, but I mean, I can't follow them to go deliver on what they say they're going to do. Or if we just have really strong relationships and really good skills, but no character, sometimes we're really good at saying things and getting people to move along, but we're not super consistent. Or when push comes to shove, we kind of trip over that start line, if you know what I mean. And so being able to continuously work through and bring those together through a personal leadership team, through coaching through practicing, actually getting out there and practicing, like I had done and you have done and others have done, of, okay, I'm going into this meeting and I'm going to try something different. When I feel the things coming on the tingles of my neck, instead of doing this, avoiding it, shutting it down, running out of the meeting, changing the subject, I'm going to engage. I'm going to keep my poise. I'm going to ask questions instead of jumping in and saying, no, I don't want to talk about that. Right? Like, we practice these things, and that intentional act is what starts to redefine our leadership style, is that intentional practice over time.
And then you go through, and then so you talk about replacing, this old mentality, this old idea, and I mean, you go down through several different myths that we believe, as leaders, as servant leaders, that are really, it's kind of just we just come by it naturally, this idea or these different ideas, and you go down through. I mean, and I don't want you to give away the whole book, because I want.
No, you should. Just do it. People got to listen and learn and be ready to go, right? We got 10 myths, from being people pleasing to being naive to being just, like rose-colored glasses optimist, to having more of a bleeding heart, like just kind of going through that. Because that, if you start to look at some of how culture defines and shows us servant leadership, and the servant leaders that when they come into the interview and they're like, I am a servant leader, we start to place these things on, and we have these characteristics, and we have a culture in a medium that's continues to pull apart this traditional leadership and servant leadership. And they're not, there's just leadership. Leaders, in fact, are servants. We serve something, a purpose that's bigger than us, and we serve the people around us to move forward. And if it's not that, it's not leadership, as these other places, Maxwell, Lencioni, the Bible, all these things show us. And so one of the things that struck me the most was, I was given this talk, and we're talking about redefining your servant leadership, and we're going through these myths that Brandon and I just listed out a couple of them. And this young man in the audience goes, I thought if I wanted to be a servant leader, I had to be a doormat. And that's not what we see. I mean, you think about some of the bests of the best, right? The servant leader top 10, you'd put Martin Luther King Jr. in there. You'd probably put Abraham Lincoln in there. You'd probably put Gandhi in there. You'd put some other folks in there. We would put Jesus in there. And none of those individuals are doormats. Those individuals were not always available, but they were very present with whomever they were with, focused on those things. They were not permissive in all of the behaviors that were allowed, but they were very principled in the values and the beliefs that they stood in. They just did it very gently, and they did it in a way that honored and respected folks. They cared deeply and had a heart to serve, but they also had bounds to say, that's not us. We can't do that right now. This is what is most important. Kind of, this is the business at hand. And so we must do this at this time. They were able to stand in the tension of tremendously hard seasons in our world, in relational challenges, in the midst of geopolitical everything. And they're standing there resolute, with an objective that is much greater than just themselves. But it really is to benefit people, all of us. The world is one of those main pieces about servant leadership, that they're not people pleasers, that in fact they are mission driven. They are doing this for something greater than just themselves. And they are inviting people and developing people and driving very kind of consistently and firmly and caringly, lovingly even, towards that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you were talking about leaders being willing to kind of make those boundaries, and it reminded me of a book called Boundaries.
That is a fantastic book. It's right here. You guys, he's pitching Redefine Your Servant Leadership. You should grab that one. But I'm telling you, Boundaries. Oh man, that one's a killer. Y'all got to read it.
Yeah, I mean, it was life altering. Because obviously there's biblical principles in there, but as you're reading it, you'll realize that biblical principles or not, the reality is too often we have these toxic relationships, and sometimes we are the toxic relationships because
I know I've been that part.
we've kind of blurred these lines, these boundaries, and because people didn't respect our boundaries, we don't respect their boundaries, and I think this all comes together real nicely talking about servant leadership, because if we want to be the leaders that we're designed and called to be, we have to be willing not only to put up boundaries in our own lives, but to respect other people's boundaries, because there are things that people have experienced that we'll never experience and we'll never understand, but there has to be some part of us that can respect that boundary. They put it there for a reason, and being willing to try and work through those different things. And in management, I've seen it, time and time and time again, where I bring in new people. I see these just tremendous talent, and I bring them in and we train them and they get going. Then quickly you realize that they haven't had as a positive experience, in their growth in their career or in the workplace that you may have had, and so they're expecting the culture to just be we're all against each other, but not a team. And so as a servant leader, being willing to get down on their level, work with them, train them, coach, counsel, teach, and I think one of the biggest things is just that patience, because not everybody is built the same way. Not everybody understands the same things. Not everybody came from the same background, the same culture. And so there are some things when it comes to, business or leadership, whether you're in the church, whether you're, from a big box company or a startup company, whatever it may be, in leadership. I think that this is critical as a servant leader, is being willing to come down. You mentioned that Jesus is one of these people that he came down to their level. He taught them in a way that they could understand. In parables and well, why do you speak in parables? They asked him. Well, he said, because they wouldn't understand if I didn't. And so he brings down these principles that we can live by in a way that's easy to understand.
He does, and so much more, right? Like just the very act of God coming into human form, and then also one of the myths is that servant leaders actually avoid power, and it came out of a conversation that I had with somebody where we were actually talking about this, and he said, Jesus was appalled by power. And I said, no, he's all powerful. He does not hate what he is, but what he hated, right? What he stood against was the injustice of those that are abusing power. But what we see the greatest servant leader in all time do is actually use his power to empower others. And so that is one of those things that servant leaders get to do fantastically, like you laid out, Brandon, by developing them, teaching them, training them, but then also saying, this is your responsibility and your charge. And now go with my responsibility kind of given, and my power and my authority given to you to make decisions, to go and do, to go and create, to go and lead yourself. Those type of things are fantastic attributes of servant leader. And it's very distributed instead of very localized into one person, right? And it's a marked difference in leadership styles, and one that does reproduce other leaders and allow others to continue to grow, and things to, like a ripple in a pond, just keep going outwards.
Absolutely. I would just kind of top that whole conversation or particular section off with, servant leaders produce or reproduce servant leaders.
100%.
Because they're so interested in their teams, in the needs of the team, and the goals that we need to reach as a team. And they keep it, John Maxwell, he wrote a book, and it was called Teamwork Makes the Dream Work. And
Yeah.
you know, you've heard that kind of just thrown here and there. Well, teamwork makes the dream work. But the reality is if you want to succeed, nobody, no, if we're being truthful, nobody is really, you know, self-sufficient. Nobody gets all their power or all their money by themselves. Somebody somewhere gave them a shot, gave them a chance, believed in them, and servant leaders can pinpoint, you know, those talents and those abilities in people, and they intentionally pull them out, draw them out of them, and then help them build up, you know, because servant leaders, they're not doormats, but they take the time, they just take the time to invest in their teams, you know, and share the goals and share the needs. And I think that that's just so critical. You know, you're going to reproduce what you are. Maybe that's
right. Yep. Well said. You do. You 100% do.
So I want you to tell people about your business, specifically about what you do. And if that was something they were interested in, and if that was something, if they wanted to, you know, increase their personal leadership or their leadership team, what are ways that they could go about that? How could they get a hold of you, your website, your podcast? They want to learn a little bit more about what's going on.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And we work with leaders and organizations that are looking to make a huge difference in this world. We always say that those that love to do business for more than just the bottom line, those are the ones that we get to work with, that are mission driven. And so we often work with those leaders that they're new into their role as executive leaders, CEOs, pastors, business owners, and it's overwhelming, and they are training their folks, and they're looking for what is that next step in training, because what they're doing isn't working or it's not sticking. And so we come in and we walk alongside that leader, that pastor, CEO, business owner, their leadership team, and then we come in and train their key leaders and their middle managers, if you will, kind of air quoting the middle managers for those that can't see me, to be able to take them through a development program, to walk through with training and coaching. And then we bring in and have an online platform called LeadWell Plus that does weekly check-ins, giving everybody insights into how is it going at work? Like, really, how are the people, the communications, the well-being, how clear are goals and priorities? It's a pathway for leaders to engage with their team members and talk about what's most important. It gives leaders visibility into the culture a little bit. And then we have built in some training resources in there so that folks can go through and self kind of go through some of those little modules. And so that is the way that we come alongside and work with organizations to help them develop outstanding leaders.
And then he has the LeadWell podcast. And
True. Yes.
You want to check that out. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a podcast where we go back and forth in between me interviewing folks, just like Brandon's doing, and also doing some stand-up 15-minute teaching topics where, again, we really focus on that mission-driven approach to developing outstanding leaders. And we do it in a principled and practical way, kind of walking through a topic and then just outlining it and how can I actually take this and start to apply it in a meeting tomorrow, in a difficult conversation that I have with somebody coming up this week. How can I sit down and outline goals and responsibilities and the key results that we are looking for? How can I turn around and use my principles, my values to build and lead a team tomorrow? That's the focus of that. Is very motivational, application, practical, and have some fun doing it.
That's awesome. And one last thing. This is the book, Redefine Your Servant Leadership. This is the plug for his book. We're going to be shameless about it because I want you to buy it. This is going to impact your life. If you're in ministry, your ministry. If you're in business, your leadership style, skill. I'm telling you, it's a tremendous book. You want to get it. I think I got mine on Amazon, but I believe
you can get it on Amazon, which is a fantastic place to get it. And you can also go to redefineyourservantleadership.com and it is available there. So either one of those are going to work just great.
And now, here's the finale. One last thing. They've listened to us kind of talk back and forth for 30 minutes. What's one last thing you want the people that have been listening to walk away from this episode with?
That when you step out in love and humility to serve other people, you will make a difference that is much larger reaching and long lasting than you know. And wherever you are, whether you are a contributor just starting a new job, whether you're leading a small team or you're leading an organization, stepping out with love, kind of acting for the benefit of other people, and doing that to serve and doing it humbly, you're going to just make steps that are remarkable, and then just keep making those steps each and every day. And you will redefine everything, yourself, the people around you, and your organization in the process.